Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a wonderful day. My name is Hibah and I'm really excited to be back with another video for you guys. Today we're going to be talking about racism, anti-racism, and privilege. Racism is a really big part of our history and still exists today. And I do want to give you a mini disclaimer that I cannot possibly go through the hundreds and hundreds of years of oppression and racism felt by so many communities in our country today, simply in just one video. A big part of understanding racism comes from understanding the concept of race. Race is the grouping of humans based on shared physical or social qualities, generally viewed as distinct by society. There are no scientific or biological implications involved when defining race. Racialization is the grouping of people based on perceived physical differences such as skin tone. Due to European imperialism, superiority of white-skinned people was used to justify enslavement and the unfair treatment of people of color and the indigenous peoples. People of European descent were superior, and there was a constructed hierarchy of power, and people that were not part of this norm were put on the bottom. Our country and so many other countries have been built on the foundation of racism. Now let's take a deeper look into racism. To put it in simpler terms, racism is the sum of racial prejudice plus power. Racial prejudice is a set of derogatory or discriminatory attitudes deriving from the perceptions of skin color or race. An expression of prejudice is directed to someone lower on the hierarchy of power. By power, we are referring to the authority granted not just to, but also from social structures and privilege. If you put it all together, racism is the expression of racial prejudice targeted to someone lower on the hierarchy of power or someone who is underprivileged. Acts of racism can be formed with intent or without intent. Either way, the impact is harmful. Racism can occur between individuals on an interpersonal level, or it can be embedded in organizations through their policies and actions. An example of individual level racism would be using racial slurs, having racist assumptions or prejudices, and unconscious or conscious acts of discrimination. Systemic racism includes practices in established institutions or organizations that result in the exclusion or promotion of certain designated groups. There does not have to be a preconceived intent of discrimination here. An example of systemic racism would be the residential schools that were created by churches and sponsored by our government to convert Indigenous youth and assimilate them into Euro-Canadian culture. The long-term detrimental impacts of residential schools are still seen today, and this is one of the many reasons why reconciliation is really important. Now let's see what white privilege means and how it relates to racism. White privilege is an unearned set of advantages, benefits, and entitlements that white people have. Having white privilege and recognizing it is not racist. And also just wanted to clarify that the word privilege does not suggest that white people have never felt struggles, like maybe in terms of financial income or facing poverty, but rather it suggests that they have a built-in advantage of not being racially profiled or discriminated against. An example of this can be as small as band-aids reflected only one skin tone, and that being of white people, or as significant as that white people are less likely to be followed, interrogated, or searched by law enforcement because they look less suspicious. White privilege does not exist solely because of subconscious acts of discrimination. It exists because systemic racism came first and is still evident in our communities. This will not change unless we take action and end its cyclical nature. So I guess we're left with the question, what can I do with my privilege? There is good news. You can use your privilege to help those that do not have it. Instead of blaming yourself for having it and disengaging from the subject as a whole because it causes you discomfort, take actions in ways you can help. Listen to the stories of people of color and other marginalized minorities and amplify these voices. Educate yourself and others and demand conversations that need to be made, even though they might seem uncomfortable. I would now like to clear up some misconceptions or myths you may have heard of. For example, reverse racism is a term that is used to define being racist against white people, but it has no historical roots as racism does. A racial prejudice can indeed be directed at a white person. For example, in this statement, white people can't dance. But it is not considered racism because of the systemic relationship of power. I did not mean that, I was just giving an example. Please do not attack me. Remember, a racial prejudice refers to a set of derogatory or discriminatory set of beliefs derived from skin color or race. Secondly, racial microaggressions are a way of transmitting derogatory messages unconsciously or consciously, but this is often overlooked because it's subtle. For instance, saying that all lives matter is implicitly racist as instead of saying Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter is a movement that is trying to say that Black lives matter too in a society that is fueled by systemic and multiple forms of racism. Saying all lives matter reinforces the idea that Black people shouldn't fight for equal treatment because they are supposedly already equal, which is not true. Also, all lives can't even matter until Black lives matter. The last thing I would like to touch on before I end this video is the concept of anti-racism. Anti-racism is an active process which involves changing values, structures, and behaviors to tackle racism. It can happen at all levels, for example, attending a protest or advocating for laws and policies that are more inclusive of marginalized minorities. It can be going beyond just reading To Kill a Mockingbird in high school and really learning about what racism means and its historical roots in our country. I encourage you to be taking part in this and being the active change our world needs to become a better place. It is important that we do not overlook these issues even though they might not directly apply to us. Just remember, in the wise words of Desmond Tutu, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. With that, thank you so much for watching. These are some resources I used in this video. If you have any more questions, let me know. And I do really appreciate you watching this video and taking a step towards learning more. And yeah, I hope to see you very soon. Have a good rest of your night.